Lily walked slowly down the long hallway of the music building, her old backpack heavy on her shoulders. The walls were covered with pictures of famous musicians and concert posters that made her feel small. She checked her phone again. 2:15 p.m. Professor Johnson had asked her to come to his office, but she had no idea why. Her hands were sweaty as she knocked on the wooden door. Through the glass window, she could see Professor Johnson sitting behind his big desk, surrounded by stacks of papers and music books. He was the head of the music department, someone she had only talked to once before during her scholarship interview. "Come in, Lily," he called out with a warm smile. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. The office smelled like old books and coffee. There were certificates on the walls and a small piano in the corner. Professor Johnson gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please sit down. Would you like some water?" Lily shook her head and sat on the edge of the chair, her folder of sheet music clutched tightly in her lap. She wondered if she was in trouble. Maybe her grades weren't good enough for the scholarship. Maybe someone had complained about her, practicing late at night. Professor Johnson leaned back in his chair and studied her face. "Lily, I've been hearing good things about you from your teachers. They tell me you're working very hard." She nodded but didn't say anything. Her throat felt dry. "I also know you're juggling a lot right now. 2 jobs, classes, and still finding time to practice. That's not easy." Lily felt her cheeks get warm. She knew everyone could see she was struggling. Her clothes weren't as nice as the other students, and she often looked tired in class. While other kids talked about private lessons and expensive instruments, she quietly did her homework in the corner. "I'm managing okay," she said quietly. Professor Johnson smiled gently. "I'm sure you are, but I called you here because I have something that might interest you. We're having our annual Donor Appreciation Gala next month." Lily's heart sank. She knew about the gala. It was a fancy event where rich people came to support the music program. She figured he was going to ask her to work at the event, maybe serve food or clean up afterward. She needed the money, but the thought of watching wealthy people enjoy themselves while she worked made her feel uncomfortable. "I know what you're thinking," Professor Johnson continued, "but I'm not asking you to work the event. I'm asking you to perform at it." Lily's eyes widened. "Perform?" "Yes. We need someone to provide some background music during the cocktail hour. Nothing fancy, just something simple and pleasant while our guests mingle and chat." "I immediately thought of you." She stared at him, not believing what she was hearing. "But Professor Johnson, I'm just a scholarship student. Those people probably expect professional musicians." He chuckled softly. "Lily, you are a musician. I've heard you practice in the evenings when I stay late. You have real talent." Lily felt her face burning. She didn't know anyone had been listening to her practice. She often stayed in the music building until it closed, using the practice rooms because her tiny apartment had no piano. Her neighbors in the student housing complex already complained about noise, so she couldn't even practice keyboard at home. "I don't know if I'm good enough for something like that," she whispered. Professor Johnson leaned forward. "Let me tell you something about our donors. Yes, they're successful people, but they're also music lovers. They donate to this program because they believe in supporting young musicians like you. They would be honored to hear you play." Lily thought about her journey with piano. She had started playing when she was 7 years old, on an old keyboard her mother had bought from a thrift store. Her family had immigrated when she was young and money was always tight. Piano lessons were a luxury they couldn't afford, so she learned from library books and free videos online. When she got to high school, a music teacher noticed her playing during lunch break and offered to give her free lessons after school. That teacher changed everything for Lily. She learned proper technique and introduced her to classical music that made her heart soar. Getting the scholarship to this university was like winning the lottery. For the first time, she had access to real pianos and qualified teachers. But she still felt like she didn't belong. The other students talked about summer music camps and conservatory prep programs that cost more than her family made in a year. "What kind of music would you want me to play?" she asked. "Something classical but accessible. Maybe a Chopin nocturne or a Mozart sonata." Something that creates a nice atmosphere without being too demanding for the audience to listen to while they're talking. Lily knew several pieces that would work. She had been working on a Chopin nocturne for months, practicing it bit by bit whenever she could find time. It was beautiful and emotional, but she had never played it for anyone except her empty practice room. How many people would be there? About 200 guests, but remember, you'll be background music. They'll be focused on their conversations and the silent auction items, no pressure at all. 200 people. Lily had never played for more than a dozen people at once, and that was just during student recitals where everyone was required to be polite. These would be important people: doctors, lawyers, business owners, people who could afford to donate thousands of dollars to the music program. When is it? 3 weeks from Saturday. I know it's not much notice, but our original pianist had a family emergency and had to cancel. You'd be saving us, really. 3 weeks. That wasn't much time to prepare for such an important event. But as Lily thought about it, she realized this might be her only chance to perform for people who truly appreciated music. These weren't just random audience members. They were people who cared enough about music education to donate their money to support it. Would I get paid? She asked, immediately feeling embarrassed about asking. Of course. It's a professional engagement. We'd pay you $300 for the evening. $300. That was more than she made in 2 weeks at her campus bookstore job. That money could cover her groceries for 2 months or help her catch up on her phone bill. Can I think about it? She asked. Professor Johnson nodded. Of course, but don't think too long. And Lily? Don't sell yourself short. You have something special. I wouldn't ask you to do this if I didn't believe you could handle it beautifully. As Lily walked back across campus, her mind raced with possibilities and fears. Part of her was terrified at the thought of playing for such an important audience, but another part of her was excited. This could be her chance to prove that she belonged here, that scholarship students could be just as talented as anyone else. She thought about her mother, who cleaned office buildings at night to help pay for Lily's education. She thought about all the time she had practiced on that old keyboard, dreaming of playing real music for real people. Maybe it was time to stop hiding in practice rooms and show the world what she could do. That night, Lily lay in her narrow dorm bed staring at the ceiling. Her roommate was already asleep, breathing softly in the bed across the room. But Lily's mind wouldn't stop racing. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined herself sitting at a grand piano in front of 200 wealthy strangers. What if she made a mistake? What if her hands shook so badly she couldn't play? What if people started talking loudly over her music, treating her like she was invisible? She grabbed her phone and Googled the university's donor gala from previous years. The photos made her stomach drop. Women in elegant evening gowns and men in expensive suits holding wine glasses and smiling at cameras. Crystal chandeliers and fancy decorations everywhere. It looked like something from a movie about rich people. Lily looked down at her pajamas, old cotton pants with a hole in the knee and a faded t-shirt from her high school. She owned exactly one dress that might work for such an event, a simple black one she had bought at a discount store for her scholarship interview. Next to those glamorous photos, she would look like she was playing dress-up. The next morning, she called her mother while walking to her first class. "Mija, that's wonderful news," her mother said in accented English mixed with Spanish. "You should be proud they asked you." "But Mom, I'm scared. These are important people. What if I mess up?" Her mother was quiet for a moment. Lily could hear the sounds of the restaurant kitchen where she worked the morning shift, preparing vegetables for lunch service. "Listen to me, Lily. When we came to this country, I was scared too. Scared to speak English. Scared I wasn't good enough for any job. But you know what I learned? Fear only has the power you give it. You have been playing piano since you were little. You have worked so hard for this chance." "It's different, Mom. I learned to play on that old keyboard. These people probably went to fancy concerts their whole lives. And that's exactly why they need to hear you. They need to remember that music comes from the heart, not from money." After hanging up, Lily felt a little better, but the worry was still there, sitting heavy in her chest like a rock. During her music theory class, she found herself staring out the window instead of taking notes. Professor Martinez was explaining chord progressions, but all Lily could think about was what piece she would play at the gala. She had been working on Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major for months. It was a beautiful piece, romantic and flowing, but also technically challenging. The melody seemed to float above the accompaniment like a conversation between old friends. She loved how it could be soft and gentle one moment, then passionate and dramatic the next. But was it too ambitious? Maybe she should choose something simpler, safer. A Mozart piece might be more appropriate for background music, but then again, Professor Johnson had specifically mentioned Chopin as an option. After class, she approached Professor Martinez, her music theory teacher. "Professor, can I ask you something? If you were playing background music at a fancy event, what would you choose?" Professor Martinez, a kind woman in her 50s who always wore colorful scarves, smiled at her. "Are you asking for a friend, or is this about the gala next month?" Lily felt her cheeks burn. "You heard about that? Word travels fast in a small music department. I think it's wonderful that Professor Johnson asked you. You're one of our most dedicated students. I'm thinking about the Chopin Nocturne I've been working on, but I'm worried it might be too much. For background music, I mean." Professor Martinez sat on the edge of her desk. "Lily, let me tell you something about background music. The best background music doesn't stay in the background. It draws people in without them realizing it. A beautiful performance of that nocturne could be exactly what those guests need to hear. But what if they don't like it? What if they think I'm showing off? Then they don't understand music. But I don't think that will happen. People who donate to music programs usually have good taste." That afternoon, during her shift at the campus bookstore, Lily found herself humming the nocturne while she organized textbooks. Her supervisor, Kevin, a graduate student who was always friendly, noticed. "You seem different today, happy but nervous. What's going on?" Lily hesitated, then told him about the gala. Kevin's eyes widened. "That's huge. I went to one of those events when I was an undergrad. My professor invited some students to see what it was like. It's pretty fancy, but the people are really nice. They're there because they love music." "Did you see the student who performed that year?" "Yeah, actually. It was this guy from the jazz program. He played some amazing pieces, and by the end of the night, people were gathered around the piano instead of mingling. He got a standing ovation." This made Lily feel even more nervous. A standing ovation? She had never even gotten applause from more than a few people at student recitals. That evening, she went to practice room number 7, her favorite because it had the best piano and the least amount of outside noise. She put her sheet music on the stand and began working through the nocturne. The first section went well. She knew it by heart now. But when she got to the more complex middle section, her fingers stumbled. She stopped and started again. Same mistake. "Come on, Lily," she whispered to herself. "You've played this 100 times." But her hands felt different tonight, less sure of themselves. Every note seemed to matter more now that she knew she would be performing for an audience. That could change her life. She practiced for 2 hours, working on the same difficult passages over and over. By the time she left the music building, her fingers ached and her shoulders were tense. Walking back to her dorm in the dark, she passed the university's main concert hall where the gala would be held. She stopped and looked up at the tall windows, imagining the elegant event happening inside. Through those windows, in just 3 weeks, 200 people would be listening to her play. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Back in her room, she video called her best friend from high school, Isabella, who was studying at a community college back home. "Girl, you're overthinking this," Isabella said, her face pixelated on Lily's phone screen. "Remember when you played at my quinceañera? You made everyone cry during the ceremony. You have this gift, Lily. Don't let fancy people intimidate you." "But this is different. These people have probably heard professional concerts at Carnegie Hall or whatever. So what? They've never heard you. And that's what makes it special." After the call, Lily opened her laptop and started researching the donors who would be at the event. She found photos from previous galas, read about successful alumni who supported the music program, learned about local business owners who believed in arts education. These weren't just rich people showing off, she realized. They were doctors who played piano in their spare time, lawyers who sang in community choirs, entrepreneurs who had studied music before switching to business. They donated because music had touched their lives in some way. Maybe Professor Martinez was right. Maybe these people would appreciate hearing something beautiful, even if it came from a nervous scholarship student instead of a professional performer. Lily closed her laptop and pulled out her sheet music one more time. She spread it across her desk and studied every note, every dynamic marking, every phrase. 3 weeks to prepare for the most important performance of her life. She could do this. She had to do this. But first, she needed to figure out what to wear. The next 3 weeks became a blur of practice, work, and worry. Lily threw herself into preparing for the gala with an intensity that surprised even her. She rearranged her entire schedule, picking up extra shifts at the bookstore to afford new sheet music and giving up her usual study time in the library. Every morning, she woke up 30 minutes earlier to practice scales and technical exercises on the old keyboard in her dorm room, using headphones so she wouldn't wake her roommate. Her fingers moved across the silent keys, muscle memory guiding each movement as she imagined the sound. Between classes, instead of grabbing lunch with friends, she hurried to the music building. Practice room 7 became her second home. She taped her schedule to the door. Other students learned to find different rooms during her regular hours. The Chopin Nocturne consumed her thoughts. She broke it down into tiny sections, working on just 4 measures at a time until each phrase was perfect. The opening melody, so gentle and romantic, had to flow like water. The dramatic middle section needed power, without losing elegance, and the ending, those soft, delicate notes that faded away like a whisper, required perfect control. But the more she practiced, the more problems she found. Her left hand wasn't steady enough during the rolling accompaniment. Her timing wavered. In the complex passages, the dynamics weren't quite right, sometimes too loud, sometimes too soft. "You're being too hard on yourself," said Alex, another music student who often practiced in the room next door. They had become friends over the past year, bonding over their shared struggles as scholarship students. "I can hear you through the wall, and it sounds beautiful." "But it's not perfect," Lily replied, wiping sweat from her forehead. "These people are expecting something amazing. They're expecting background music while they drink wine and talk about their golf games. You're making this bigger than it needs to be." But Lily couldn't help herself. This performance felt like more than just playing background music. It felt like her chance to prove she belonged at this university, that her scholarship wasn't a mistake, that a girl from a working-class immigrant family could hold her own among the elite. Her grades started to suffer. She turned in a history paper 2 days late and barely studied for her math midterm. Her academic advisor sent her a concerned email, but Lily was too focused on the nocturne to worry about anything else. At work, she made careless mistakes. She put textbooks in the AWA, wrong sections, and gave customers incorrect change. Kevin, her supervisor, pulled her aside during her Thursday shift. "Lily, I know you're stressed about this performance, but you need to focus when you're here. Professor Smith complained that you charged her for the wrong book yesterday." "I'm sorry," Lily said, feeling embarrassed. "I just have a lot on my mind. Look, why don't you take the afternoon off? Go practice or rest or whatever you need to do. But when you come back tomorrow, I need you present, okay?" Lily nodded gratefully and hurried back to the music building. But instead of going to practice room 7, she sat on a bench outside and called her mother. "Mija, you sound tired." "I am tired, Mom. I'm practicing 4 hours a day, working, going to classes. I don't know if I can keep this up." "Are you eating enough?" Lily realized she had been living on granola bars and coffee for the past week. Real meals took too much time away from practicing. "I'm fine." "No, you're not fine. Listen to me carefully. This performance is important, yes, but it's not worth making yourself sick. You need to take care of yourself." "But Mom, what if I mess up? What if I embarrass myself in front of all those important people?" Her mother was quiet for a moment. "Do you remember when you were 8 years old and you played Happy Birthday for your cousin's party? You were so nervous, but when you started playing, everyone stopped talking and listened. Your tia Rosa started crying because it was so beautiful. Lily smiled despite her stress. She did remember that day. It was one of the first times she realized that music could move people. That wasn't because you were perfect, her mother continued. It was because you played with your heart. Don't forget that, mija. These rich people, they can buy expensive concert tickets anytime they want. But they can't buy what you have, the ability to touch someone's soul through music. After hanging up, Lily felt a little calmer. But when she went back to practice room 7, the anxiety returned. She opened her sheet music and began playing, but her hands felt heavy and uncoordinated. The left-hand pattern that had seemed easy yesterday now felt impossible. Her right-hand melody lacked expression. She stopped and started dozens of times, getting more frustrated with each attempt. "This is hopeless," she said out loud to the empty room. She put her head down on the piano keys, feeling overwhelmed. Maybe she should call Professor Johnson and tell him she couldn't do it. Maybe she should suggest he find a different student, someone with more experience and confidence. But then she thought about the $300 she would earn, money that could ease the constant financial stress her family faced. She thought about her mother, working double shifts at the restaurant to help pay for her education. She thought about all the students who would benefit from the donor money raised at this event. Lily lifted her head and looked at her reflection in the piano's polished surface. Her eyes were tired, and her hair was messy from running her hands through it in frustration. But she also saw determination there. She started playing again, this time more slowly. Instead of trying to perfect every note, she focused on the emotion of the piece. She thought about what the composer might have been feeling when he wrote this music. Perhaps love, longing, hope, sadness. She let those feelings guide her fingers. Something shifted. The music began to flow more naturally. The technical problems were still there, but they seemed less important now. The nocturne started to tell a story, her story. Over the final week before the gala, Lily found a better balance. She still practiced intensively, but she also made sure to eat proper meals and get enough sleep. She studied for her other classes and focused during her work shifts. 3 days before the event, she had a breakthrough. Everything suddenly clicked: the technical passages, the emotional expression, the overall flow of the piece. She played the entire nocturne without stopping, and for the first time she felt like she was making music instead of just hitting notes. Professor Martinez happened to be walking by the practice rooms and heard her playing. When Lily finished, there was a soft knock on the door. "That was absolutely beautiful," Professor Martinez said, poking her head inside. "I got goosebumps listening from the hallway. Those donors are in for a real treat." The day before the gala, Lily's roommate helped her try on the black dress she planned to wear. "You look elegant," her roommate said, adjusting the sleeves. "Very professional." Lily looked at herself in the small dorm room mirror. The dress was simple but flattering, and she had borrowed a pair of low heels from a friend. She wouldn't look out of place among the fancy guests, but more importantly, she felt comfortable and confident. That evening, she did one final practice session. This time, she didn't focus on perfection. Instead, she played the nocturne as a gift, to the audience who would hear it, to the composers who had written it, and to herself for having the courage to perform it. Walking back to her dorm under the stars, Lily felt ready. She had worked harder than ever before, pushed herself beyond what she thought was possible, and discovered reserves of strength she didn't know she had. Tomorrow night, she would sit at a grand piano in front of 200 strangers and share something beautiful with the world. Whatever happened, she knew she had prepared as well as she could. Now all she had to do was trust herself and let the music speak. The morning of the gala, Lily woke up with butterflies dancing in her stomach. She had barely slept, tossing and turning as her mind replayed every measure of the nocturne. Now, pale sunlight filtered through her dorm room window, and she could hear her roommate getting ready for Saturday classes. "Big day," her roommate whispered, trying not to wake others in the hallway. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified," Lily admitted, pulling her covers up to her chin. "What if I forget the music?" What if my hands shake so badly I can't play? You're going to be amazing. I've heard you practicing, remember? You could play that piece in your sleep. Lily spent the morning trying to distract herself. She did laundry, organized her desk, and attempted to study for a history exam she had the following week. But her concentration was scattered. Every few minutes, her fingers would unconsciously practice passages from the nocturne on whatever surface was nearby, her desk, her textbook, her knee. Around noon, she decided to visit the concert hall where the gala would take place. She needed to see the space, to feel comfortable in the environment where she would perform in just a few hours. The university's main concert hall was an impressive building with tall columns and elegant architecture. During the day, it looked formal but welcoming. Lily used her student ID to get inside, explaining to the security guard that she was performing at the evening event. Inside, the transformation was already underway. Workers were setting up round tables covered with crisp white tablecloths. Others were arranging elaborate flower centerpieces, white roses and baby's breath that looked expensive and sophisticated. Crystal stemware caught the light from the chandeliers overhead. But what took Lily's breath away was the piano. In the corner of the hall, positioned where it could provide music for the entire space, stood the most beautiful grand piano she had ever seen. It was a concert-quality Steinway, its black surface so highly polished she could see her reflection from across the room. The lid was propped open, revealing the complex arrangement of strings and hammers inside. Lily approached it slowly, almost afraid to get too close. This was nothing like the upright pianos in the practice rooms or the digital keyboard in her dorm. This was an instrument that had probably been played by professional musicians, visiting artists, and distinguished faculty members. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said a voice behind her. Lily turned to see Professor Johnson approaching, carrying a clipboard and looking slightly stressed. "Professor, I didn't expect to see you here so early." "Last-minute details," he said, gesturing around the hall. "The florists are running late and we're still waiting on the wine delivery, but I'm glad you're here. I wanted you to have a chance to try the piano before tonight." Lily's eyes widened. "Really? I can play it now?" "Of course. In fact, I insist. You should never perform on an instrument you haven't tested first." With trembling hands, Lily approached the piano bench. She adjusted the height and positioned herself in front of the keys. The piano bench was padded leather, much more comfortable than the hard wooden benches in the practice rooms. She placed her fingers on the keys and played a simple scale. The sound that emerged was rich and resonant, filling the entire hall with warmth. Each note was perfectly balanced, responding to her touch with sensitivity she had never experienced before. "Go ahead," Professor Johnson encouraged. "Play through your piece." Lily took a deep breath and began the opening measures of the nocturne. From the very first notes, she could tell this performance would be different from any of her practice sessions. The piano seemed to amplify not just the volume of her playing, but the emotion as well. The melody soared above the accompaniment with crystalline clarity. As she played, workers continued their preparations around the hall, but she noticed several of them had stopped to listen. The haunting beauty of Chopin's music seemed to transform the space, making the formal setup feel more intimate and welcoming. When she finished, Professor Johnson was smiling broadly. "Lily, that was extraordinary. You've been holding back in those practice rooms. This instrument brings out something special in your playing." "It's so responsive," she said, still running her fingers lightly over the keys. "I barely have to press them, and the sound is so rich. That's the difference between a good piano and a great one. Tonight, you're going to shine on this instrument." Lily spent another hour familiarizing herself with the piano, testing different dynamics and getting comfortable with its touch. She practiced the trickiest passages, marveling at how much easier they felt on the superior instrument. By mid-afternoon, she was feeling more confident. She went back to her dorm to rest and prepare for the evening. She took a long shower, washed her hair, and spent time doing her makeup carefully. She wasn't used to wearing much makeup, but she wanted to look professional for such an important event. Her dress hung on the closet door, freshly pressed. Her borrowed shoes sat neatly on the floor beside it. On her desk, she had arranged her sheet music in a leather folder that Alex had lent her. much nicer than her usual worn binder. As the sun began to set, Lily's nervousness returned with full force. She tried eating a light dinner, but her stomach was too knotted to manage more than a few bites of soup and crackers. At 6 o'clock, she began getting dressed. The black dress fit perfectly, making her look older and more sophisticated than her 19 years. The borrowed heels added some height and made her feel more confident. She pulled her long hair back into an elegant low bun and added the simple pearl earrings her mother had given her for graduation. Looking in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Gone was the tired-looking scholarship student in worn jeans and old sneakers. In her place stood a young woman who looked like she belonged at a fancy gala. Her roommate whistled appreciatively. "Lily, you look absolutely stunning. Those donors are going to be blown away." At 7:30, Lily made her way back to the concert hall. The sun had set, and the building was now lit with warm golden light. Elegant cars were pulling up to the front entrance, and she could see well-dressed guests beginning to arrive. She used the side entrance that Professor Johnson had told her about, avoiding the main crowd. Inside, the transformation was complete. The hall looked like something from a fairy tale, with soft lighting, beautiful flowers, and tables set with fine china and crystal glasses. Guests were beginning to arrive, and Lily felt a wave of intimidation wash over her. These were clearly successful, sophisticated people. The women wore designer gowns and sparkling jewelry. The men looked distinguished in their tailored suits. Everyone seemed to know each other, greeting with warm hugs and animated conversations. Lily made her way to the piano, trying to stay invisible. She arranged her music and adjusted the bench one more time. Her hands were starting to shake slightly, and she pressed them against her dress to steady them. "You must be our pianist for this evening," said a warm voice beside her. Lily turned to see an elegant older woman in a navy blue gown, wearing a name tag that identified her as one of the event organizers. "Yes, I'm Lily. I'll be providing background music during the cocktail hour." "How wonderful. I'm Mrs. Patterson, and I help coordinate these events. We're so pleased to have you with us tonight. Is there anything you need? Water? A place to put your things?" Mrs. Patterson's kindness helped calm Lily's nerves. "I think I'm all set, thank you." "Excellent. We'll begin seating guests in about 15 minutes, so you can start whenever you're ready. Don't worry about playing constantly, just provide some lovely atmosphere while people mingle." As Mrs. Patterson walked away, Lily took one final look around the hall. In a few minutes, this space would be filled with 200 people, all successful and accomplished in their own fields. They would be eating gourmet food, drinking fine wine, and supporting the music program that had given her this opportunity. She thought about her journey to this moment, the years of practicing on an old keyboard, the countless hours in practice rooms, the financial struggles that had made her question whether she could continue her education. All of that had led to this night, this chance to share her love of music with people who could appreciate it. Lily placed her hands on the piano keys and took a deep breath. The concert hall was filling with the sound of conversation and laughter, glasses clinking and footsteps on the polished floor. It was time to begin. Lily's hands hovered over the piano keys for what felt like an eternity. Around her, the elegant hall buzzed with conversation as guests found their name tags and began mixing and mingling. The sound of laughter mixed with the gentle clinking of wine glasses and the rustle of evening gowns. She could see Professor Johnson across the room, talking with a distinguished older gentleman in an expensive suit. He caught her eye and gave her an encouraging nod. Mrs. Patterson was near the entrance, greeting guests with warm smiles and directing them toward the registration table. Taking a deep breath, Lily gently pressed the first keys of Chopin's Nocturne, in E-flat major. The opening notes floated across the room, soft and tentative, like a question being asked in a whisper. At first, the music blended seamlessly into the background atmosphere, exactly as intended. Guests continued their conversations without seeming to notice. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne glasses, and a group of women near the silent auction display were examining a vacation package to Italy. But something magical began to happen as Lily's fingers found their rhythm on the responsive keys of the concert grand. The piano was so much more expressive than anything she had ever played. Every subtle touch, every slight change in pressure, translated into nuanced sound that seemed to breathe with life. The opening melody of the nocturne began to weave its way through the room like a gentle stream, finding its path through a meadow. The notes were clear and pure, each one perfectly balanced against the others. Lily had practiced this piece hundreds of times, but on this magnificent instrument, it felt like she was discovering it for the first time. As she moved into the second phrase, her nervousness began to melt away. The familiar music became a comfortable friend, guiding her fingers and filling her with confidence. She was no longer thinking about the audience or worrying about making mistakes. She was simply making music. The nocturne's first section was deceptively simple, a beautiful melody supported by a gentle rolling accompaniment in the left hand. But Lily brought something special to it, a warmth and sincerity that came from years of loving this piece. Each phrase had been shaped by countless practice sessions, refined through repetition until it expressed exactly what she felt in her heart. Near the registration table, a woman in a red dress paused mid-sentence in her conversation with a colleague. She tilted her head slightly, as if trying to catch something she had almost missed. The melody had reached a particularly beautiful moment, where Chopin's genius shone through in the way the harmony supported and enhanced the simple tune. Lily wasn't aware of the woman's attention. She was lost in the music now, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm, her face reflecting the emotions of the piece. The anxiety that had plagued her for weeks was gone, replaced by the pure joy of making beautiful sounds on an instrument that responded to her every thought. The nocturne moved into its more dramatic middle section, where the melody became more passionate and urgent. This was the part Lily had struggled with most during practice, where the technical demands increased and the emotional intensity required careful balance. But tonight, on this piano, everything felt natural and effortless. Her left hand maintained the steady accompaniment while her right hand soared through the more complex melodic lines. The dynamics swelled and receded like ocean waves, building tension and then releasing it in moments of breathtaking beauty. More guests began to notice. Conversations didn't stop entirely, but they became quieter, more subdued. People found themselves listening with half an ear while they continued their social interactions. The music wasn't demanding their full attention, but it was certainly earning their respect. Dr. Williams, a prominent surgeon who had been discussing a golf tournament with two other men, found his attention drifting to the piano in the corner. He had heard countless performances over the years. His wife was a patron of the symphony, and they attended concerts regularly. But there was something different about this young woman's playing, something honest and heartfelt that cut through the social chatter. "Who is that playing?" he asked his companions, but they were already turning to look as well. Lily was completely unaware of the growing attention. She had reached the nocturne's most technically challenging passage, where rapid notes cascaded down the keyboard like falling stars. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, each note crystal clear despite the speed. The practice room sessions had prepared her well, but the superior piano made everything feel effortless. The music built to an emotional climax, where Chopin's harmonic genius created moments of almost unbearable beauty. Lily's playing captured every nuance, every subtle shift in mood and color. She wasn't just playing notes on a page, she was telling a story, sharing a piece of her soul with everyone in the room. Mrs. Patterson, who had been checking items off her clipboard near the entrance, stopped what she was doing entirely. She had organized dozens of these events over the years and had heard many student performers provide background music. But this was different. This young woman wasn't just providing pleasant atmosphere. She was creating art. The nocturne began, its gentle descent toward the ending, the passion and drama giving way to a return of the opening's tender simplicity. But now the melody seemed enriched by the journey it had taken, more complex and meaningful than when it first appeared. Lily shaped each phrase with the wisdom gained from experiencing the entire piece, making the familiar tune sound fresh and new. Around the room, conversations had grown noticeably quieter. Guests weren't stopping their socializing entirely, but the music had woven itself into their consciousness, creating a backdrop of beauty that enhanced rather than competed with their interactions. The atmosphere in the room had changed. becoming more refined and contemplative. A young couple near the silent auction had moved closer to the piano, wine glasses forgotten in their hands. The woman, a local arts patron, recognized the quality of what she was hearing. This wasn't just competent student playing. This was musical storytelling of the highest order. "She's incredible," she whispered to her husband, a banker who usually had little patience for classical music. But even he found himself drawn in by the emotional honesty of Lily's performance. Professor Johnson watched from across the room with growing amazement. He had known Lily was talented, but he was witnessing something beyond his expectations. The shy, uncertain student who had sat in his office 3 weeks ago had transformed into a confident artist, sharing her gift with grace and authenticity. The nocturne approached its conclusion. Lily allowed herself to become fully absorbed in the music's final statement. The melody returned to its opening simplicity, but now it carried the weight of everything that had come before. Each note was precious, carefully placed like jewels in a setting designed to show their beauty. The last few measures required the most delicate touch, notes that needed to fade away like whispers in the wind. Lily's technique was flawless, her musical instincts perfect. The final chord hung in the air for a moment, resonating through the hall before slowly dissolving into silence. Only then did Lily become aware of her surroundings again. She had been so lost in the music that she hadn't noticed the change in the room's atmosphere. As she lifted her hands from the keys and looked up, she saw something that took her breath away. The conversation level had dropped significantly. Many guests had turned to face the piano, their attention fully captured by what they had just heard. Wine glasses were paused halfway to lips, and even the waiters had slowed their service to listen. What she was seeing was impossible, she thought. This was supposed to be background music, pleasant atmosphere while people focused on other things, but somehow, without meaning to, she had done something more. She had made them all stop and truly listen. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the concert hall existed in a bubble of perfect silence. Lily sat at the piano bench, her hands still positioned above the keys, staring out at an audience she hadn't meant to capture. The last notes of the nocturne seemed to hang in the air like morning mist, slowly dissolving but leaving their essence behind. She blinked, trying to process what she was seeing. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was meant to be invisible, providing pleasant background music while sophisticated guests discussed business and charity work over wine and hors d'oeuvres. Instead, she found herself looking out at a room full of people who had, without realizing it, become an audience. The woman in the red dress near the registration table stood with her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. Her conversation, with colleagues completely forgotten. Dr. Williams and his golf partners had turned away from their discussion entirely, their bodies angled toward the piano corner. Even the young couple examining the silent auction items had moved several steps closer, drawn by the magnetic pull of the music. Mrs. Patterson stood near the entrance with her clipboard clutched against her chest, her mouth slightly open in surprise. In 30 years of organizing donor events, she had never seen background music command this kind of attention. The professional musicians they usually hired were competent and pleasant, but they understood their role was to enhance, not overshadow, the social atmosphere. This young student had somehow transcended that role without even trying. Professor Johnson felt a mixture of pride and amazement as he watched the scene unfold. He had recognized Lily's talent during her scholarship audition, but this was something beyond technical skill or even musical understanding. This was the rare ability to communicate directly from heart to heart through music, to make listeners forget they were listening and simply feel. Lily's mind raced as she took in the unexpected scene. Had she played too loudly? Had she somehow misunderstood her instructions? Professor Johnson had specifically asked for something simple that wouldn't distract from the social aspects of the evening. But the evidence before her eyes suggested she had done exactly the opposite. Panic began to creep up her throat. What if the donors were annoyed that their conversations had been interrupted? What if Professor Johnson was embarrassed by her failure to follow directions? What if she had ruined the entire event by drawing too much attention to herself? But then she noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. The faces looking back at her weren't showing annoyance or frustration. Instead, she saw something she had never expected to see in her life: genuine appreciation, even wonder. These successful, sophisticated people weren't looking at her with the polite tolerance she had anticipated. They were looking at her like she had given them a gift. Dr. Williams, who attended symphony concerts regularly with his wife, recognized what he had just witnessed. This wasn't the technically perfect but emotionally distant playing he often heard from conservatory students. This was music making in its purest form, where technique served emotion rather than the other way around. The young woman had played Chopin as if she understood something essential about human longing and beauty. "My goodness," whispered the woman in red to her companion, finally lowering her champagne glass. "That was absolutely beautiful. Who is she?" Her companion, a successful attorney who normally had little patience for classical music, found himself equally moved. "I have no idea, but that was something special." Near the silent auction display, the young arts patron tugged on her husband's sleeve. "Did you hear that? Did you actually listen to what she just played?" Her husband, who usually endured classical performances out of social obligation, nodded slowly. "I did. I couldn't help it. There was something about the way she played. It made me actually want to listen." The spell was broken by the gentle sound of someone beginning to clap. Mrs. Patterson, overcome by what she had witnessed, started applauding softly. The sound seemed to wake the room from its trance, and gradually, other guests joined in. But this wasn't the polite, brief applause typically given to background performers. This was genuine appreciation, the kind of response usually reserved for featured artists at the end of a formal concert. The clapping grew stronger and more sustained, accompanied by murmurs of appreciation and approval. Lily felt her cheeks burning as she realized the entire room was applauding her. She stood up from the piano bench awkwardly, unsure of how to respond. She had never been the center of attention at such an elegant event, had never experienced this kind of recognition from people whose approval seemed to matter so much. "Thank you," she said softly, though her voice was barely audible over the applause. She attempted a small bow, the way she had seen professional musicians do in the concert videos she watched online. Professor Johnson made his way through the crowd, toward the piano, his face beaming with pride and satisfaction. This was beyond anything he had hoped for when he invited Lily to perform. She hadn't just provided pleasant background music, she had elevated the entire evening. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, raising his voice to address the room, "I'd like you to meet Lily Rodriguez, one of our most talented music students here at the university." The applause renewed with even greater enthusiasm. Lily felt overwhelmed by the attention, but also deeply grateful. These people didn't know about her scholarship status, her family's financial struggles, or the hours she spent working in the campus bookstore to make ends meet. They were responding purely to her music, to the beauty she had been able to create in this moment. Dr. Williams approached the piano with his wife, who had been across the room talking with other donors. "My dear," he said to Lily, "that was absolutely magnificent. You have a real gift." His wife, an accomplished amateur pianist herself, nodded enthusiastically. "I was completely transported. You play with such feeling, such authenticity. Have you considered a career in performance?" Lily felt tongue-tied. These were exactly the kind of successful, intimidating people she had been afraid to perform for, and they were treating her like a colleague, like someone whose artistic opinion mattered. I'm just a student," she managed to say. "This is my first time playing for an audience like this." "Well, it certainly won't be your last if I have anything to say about it," said Mrs. Patterson, joining the growing circle around the piano. "We absolutely must have you back for future events." More donors approached, each with words of praise and encouragement. A local business owner mentioned knowing several venues that hosted classical music performances. A retired music teacher offered to connect Lily with former colleagues who might be able to provide additional training opportunities. But what moved Lily most was the genuine warmth in their responses. These weren't people offering polite compliments out of social obligation. They had been genuinely touched by her performance, and their appreciation was real and heartfelt. "You know, said the young arts patron who had moved closer during the performance. "I've been attending classical concerts for 15 years, and what you just played was more moving than many professional performances I've heard. You have something special, a direct connection to the music that can't be taught." Lily found herself surrounded by a group of influential, successful people who were treating her not as a scholarship student providing a service, but as an artist who had shared something meaningful with them. The intimidation she had felt earlier was being replaced by a growing sense of confidence and belonging. The evening was far from over, but already Lily knew that her life had changed in some fundamental way. She had set out to provide simple background music and had instead discovered that her voice as a musician was worth hearing, that her interpretation of beautiful music could move people in ways she had never imagined possible. As the guests gradually returned to their conversations and the evening's program continued, Lily remained at the piano, no longer invisible, no longer just background accompaniment. She had become, in the space of one nocturne, a musician whose gift had been recognized and celebrated by people who understood the value of artistic excellence. The transformation was complete, but the evening was just beginning. As the initial applause died down and guests began to disperse back to their conversations, Lily thought the magical moment was over. She had experienced something beyond her wildest dreams, genuine appreciation from sophisticated music lovers who had been moved by her playing. Now she assumed things would return to normal. She would continue providing background music while the donors enjoyed their dinner and auction. But something had fundamentally shifted in the room's atmosphere. Instead of returning to their previous conversations about business and golf, guests found themselves discussing what they had just heard. The music had awakened something in them, a reminder of why they supported the arts in the first place. "Had forgotten," Dr. Williams said to his wife as they moved toward the dinner tables, "how music can just reach into your chest and grab your heart." "She made Chopin sound like he was sitting right there, telling us his secrets," his wife replied, glancing back toward the piano where Lily was preparing to continue playing. Word began to spread throughout the room in the way that news travels at social gatherings, quietly but quickly. Guests who had been in the restroom or outside on the terrace during Lily's first piece were told by friends about what they had missed. "You have to listen to this student," became a common refrain. "She's extraordinary." Mrs. Patterson found herself fielding questions from donors who wanted to know more about Lily. Where had she studied? What was her background? Would she be performing a full piece later in the evening? The event coordinator realized she was witnessing something unprecedented, background music becoming the main attraction. Lily, unaware of the growing buzz around her, began her second piece. She had chosen Mozart's Sonata in a major, a lighter, composition that she thought would be more appropriate for dinner conversation. But once again, as her fingers found the keys, magic began to happen. The Mozart piece started with a playful, almost cheerful melody that seemed to dance across the piano keys. Where the Chopin had been romantic and introspective, this music was bright and spirited. Lily brought the same emotional honesty to Mozart that she had to Chopin, but now she was sharing joy instead of longing. The effect on the room was immediate and even more pronounced than before. Conversations didn't just quiet down, they stopped entirely in many areas of the hall. Guests who had been heading to the bar turned around and moved closer to the piano. Others abandoned their examination of auction items and found themselves drawn by the infectious energy of Mozart's composition. This time, Lily noticed the attention more quickly. As she played through the sonata's opening movement, she became aware that the background noise of the room was diminishing. When she reached a particularly brilliant passage where both hands danced together in rapid dialogue, she could hear people murmuring appreciation. "Listen to that technique," whispered the retired music teacher to her companion. "Perfect articulation, and she makes it look effortless." But it wasn't just the technical skill that was captivating the audience. Lily played Mozart with a sense of discovery, as if she was delighting in each melodic turn and harmonic surprise right along with the listeners. Her face reflected the music's moods, serious during the more contemplative passages, almost smiling during the playful sections. Professor Johnson watched in amazement as his carefully planned cocktail hour transformed into an impromptu concert. Guests were abandoning the social aspects of the evening entirely, choosing instead to gather around the piano and simply listen. He had never seen anything like it at a donor event. The young business owner who had mentioned performance venues earlier was now standing directly beside the piano, his wine glass forgotten in his hand. He was mentally calculating how quickly he could book Lily for his company's upcoming corporate events. This wasn't just good music. This was the kind of performance that people would remember and talk about for years. As Lily moved into the Mozart Sonatas development section, where the composer took his simple themes on a journey through different keys and moods, something extraordinary happened. The entire room fell silent. It wasn't a gradual quieting like before. It was as if someone had pressed a pause button on all conversation, all movement, all activity except for the music flowing from the piano. 200 successful, busy people, doctors, lawyers, business owners, professors, stood completely still, focused entirely on a 19-year-old music student who was sharing Mozart's genius with them. Lily felt the silence like a physical presence. Her awareness of the audience had grown throughout the piece, but now she could sense their complete attention, their total focus on every note she played. Instead of feeling nervous, she felt energized. This was what music was supposed to be, a direct connection between human hearts, mediated by sound and emotion. She brought the Mozart to its brilliant conclusion, her fingers flying through the final passages with joy and confidence. The last chord rang out clear and triumphant, and then there was silence. This time the silence lasted even longer than after the Chopin. Lily could hear her own heartbeat, could sense the held breath of 200 people processing what they had just experienced. She looked up from the piano keys to find herself facing a sea of faces, all focused on her with expressions of wonder and appreciation. Then the applause began. But this wasn't like the polite applause after the nocturne. This was an eruption of sound that seemed to shake the crystal chandeliers. It started from multiple points in the room simultaneously, as if the audience couldn't contain their appreciation for another second. People weren't just clapping, they were cheering, calling out words of praise, expressing their amazement in voices filled with genuine emotion. "Brava!" called out the arts patron near the auction display, using the traditional acclaim for a female performer. "Incredible!" shouted Dr. Williams, his usual reserved demeanor completely abandoned. The retired music teacher had tears streaming down her face as she applauded, remembering her own years of trying to inspire students to connect with music the way this young woman did naturally. But the most amazing moment was when the applause evolved into something even more extraordinary. Led by Professor Johnson, who was beaming with pride, the entire room rose to their feet. Every single guest, from the most distinguished alumni to the youngest donors, stood up and gave Lily a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. Lily sat on the piano bench in shock, completely overwhelmed by the response. She had never imagined that her music could create this kind of reaction. These were people who attended professional concerts regularly, who had heard some of the world's best musicians perform. Yet they were giving her, a scholarship student from a working-class family, the kind of recognition usually reserved for established artists. The standing ovation continued for what felt like minutes, though it was probably only 30 or 40 seconds. When it finally began to subside, the room didn't return to its previous social atmosphere. Instead, guests remained gathered around the piano area, reluctant to break the spell that had been created. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mrs. Patterson announced, her voice carrying clearly through the hall, "I think we can all agree that we've just witnessed something very special. Lily Rodriguez has given us a gift tonight, a reminder of why we believe in supporting young artists and music education." The applause renewed, and Lily finally stood up from the piano bench, attempting another awkward bow. She was still processing what had happened, still trying to understand how her simple background music had transformed into this moment of connection and celebration. As the formal program of the evening was about to begin, with dinner service and the charity auction, Lily realized that her role for the evening was supposed to be finished. But the guests clearly wanted more. She could see it in their faces, hear it in their continued praise and requests. "Will you play again later?" asked the young arts patron. "Do you know any Rachmaninoff?" inquired Dr. Williams's wife. "I hope this isn't the last time we hear you perform," said the business owner. Standing there in her simple black dress, surrounded by some of the community's most influential people, Lily understood that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't yet fully comprehend. She had come to provide background music, and had instead discovered that her voice as a musician was not only worth hearing, it was capable of moving people in profound and unexpected ways. The evening was far from over, but already Lily knew she would remember this moment for the rest of her life. The night she learned that sometimes the most powerful performances happen when you stop trying to be perfect and simply share what's in your heart. The weeks following the gala passed like a whirlwind for Lily. She kept expecting to wake up and find that the whole evening had been an elaborate dream, that she hadn't really received 2 standing ovations from 200 distinguished guests, that her phone wasn't buzzing constantly with messages from people who had been in the audience that night. But the evidence was everywhere. Professor Johnson's office had been flooded with calls from donors asking about that remarkable young pianist. Mrs. Patterson had already booked Lily for 3 more university events. Most importantly, Lily's own relationship with music had been transformed by that magical evening. The first major change came just 2 days after the gala. Dr. Williams, the surgeon who had been so moved by her performance, called Professor Johnson with an offer that would change Lily's life. His wife, it turned out, had studied piano at a prestigious conservatory before choosing a different career path. She wanted to provide private lessons for Lily, free of charge. "We believe in investing in exceptional talent," Dr. Williams explained, when he and his wife met with Lily in Professor Johnson's office. "What you did that night, that can't be taught. But we can help you refine it, help you reach your full potential as an artist." Lily sat in the same chair where just a month earlier, she had nervously accepted the request to play something simple at the donor event. Now she was being offered weekly private lessons with a woman who had trained with some of the world's best teachers. "I don't know how to thank you," Lily said, her voice shaky with emotion. "Play," said Mrs. Williams simply. "Keep sharing your gift with the world. That's thanks enough." The second major development came from an unexpected source. The young business owner who had been so impressed by her performance owned a chain of upscale restaurants, and he wanted to hire Lily to perform during special events. But more than that, he had recorded part of her Mozart performance on his phone and shared it on social media. The video went viral in a way that none of them had anticipated. Within a week, it had been viewed over 1 million times, shared by music lovers around the world who were captivated by the combination of technical skill and emotional honesty in Lily's playing. Comments poured in from musicians, teachers, and classical music fans who wanted to know more about this young pianist. "This is what music is supposed to sound like," wrote one viewer. "I haven't been moved by a performance like this in years," commented another. "Who is this girl? She needs to be performing in concert halls immediately," demanded a third. The viral video brought opportunities that Lily had never dreamed possible. Conservatories across the country reached out with scholarship offers. Concert venues inquired about booking her for recitals. Music agents expressed interest in representing her. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from other young musicians who saw themselves in Lily's story. Students from working-class backgrounds wrote to tell her that her success had inspired them to keep pursuing their musical dreams despite financial obstacles. Music teachers shared the video with their students as an example of how technical skill combined with emotional authenticity could create truly moving performances. The transformation in Lily's daily life was dramatic. She was able to quit her job at the campus bookstore, using her performance income to cover expenses. Her grades improved immediately when she no longer had to balance work shifts with study time. Most importantly, she had more time to practice and develop as a musician. But the changes went deeper than just practical improvements. The confidence she had gained from that night at the gala affected every aspect of her playing. When she sat down at the piano now, she wasn't just a scholarship student trying to prove she belonged. She was an artist with something valuable to share. Her private lessons with Mrs. Williams opened up new dimensions in her playing. The technical refinements were important, but more valuable was the mentorship from someone who understood both the musical and business sides of a performance. Career. "You have a rare gift," Mrs. Williams told her during one of their weekly sessions. "You make people feel something when you play. Never lose that in pursuit of technical perfection. The world has plenty of technically perfect pianists. What it needs are musicians who can touch hearts." 6 months after the gala, Lily gave her first full-length solo recital in the university's concert hall, the same venue where she had nervously provided background music. This time she was the featured artist and the hall was sold out. Many of the donors from the original gala attended, eager to hear her perform a complete program. The recital was a triumph. Lily played a challenging program that included the Chopin Nocturne that had started it all, along with works by Mozart, Beethoven, and contemporary composers. Her playing had grown more sophisticated through months of intensive study, but it retained the emotional directness that had captivated that first audience. During the intermission, Lily stood in the green room behind the stage, looking at herself, in the mirror. She was wearing an elegant concert gown, a gift from Mrs. Williams. Her hair was professionally styled, and she carried herself with the poise of an established performer. But most importantly, she felt like herself, like the same girl who had learned to play on an old keyboard in her family's small apartment, just with more tools and opportunities to share her love of music. The second half of the recital included a piece she had written herself, inspired by her family's immigration story and her own journey as a musician. Playing her own composition for an audience felt like the ultimate expression of everything she had learned about the power of authentic artistic expression. After the final notes of her recital, the standing ovation was even longer and more enthusiastic than the one at the gala. But now Lily knew how to receive such appreciation gracefully. She took her bows with confidence, acknowledging the audience's appreciation while staying connected to the music that had created the moment. A year later, Lily was accepted to one of the country's most prestigious graduate music programs, with a full scholarship and a teaching assistantship. The scholarship student who had once worried about affording new sheet music was now on a path toward a professional performance career. But perhaps the most important impact of that night at the year gala wasn't on Lily's career. It was on her understanding of what music could accomplish. She had learned that authentic artistic expression could bridge any gap between performer and audience, that sharing music with honesty and passion could create moments of connection that transcended social and economic differences. The university established a new scholarship program in Lily's name, designed to support students from underrepresented backgrounds who showed exceptional musical promise. She insisted that recipients be chosen not just for technical skill, but for their ability to communicate emotion through music. Years later, as an established concert pianist performing in major venues around the world, Lily would always remember the night she was asked to play something simple and instead discovered the transformative power of sharing her authentic musical voice with others. She learned that the most profound performances often come not from trying to impress an audience, but from simply offering them the gift of music played with complete honesty and passion. That lesson, learned in front of 200 donors at a university gala, became the foundation of her entire approach to music making. The shy scholarship student who had nervously knocked on Professor Johnson's door had become a confident artist. But more importantly, she had become someone who understood that music's greatest power lies in its ability to connect human hearts across any divide. Every time she sat down at a piano, whether in a practice room or a concert hall, she carried with her the memory of that magical night when everything changed, the night she learned that sometimes the simplest request can lead to the most extraordinary results. And in quiet moments when she played the Chopin Nocturne that had started it all, she could still feel the presence of that first audience, their attention and appreciation reminding her that music, at its best, is always a gift shared between hearts that understand its beauty.